Welcome, it's ShoZEN Infinity here. I hope you're having an amazing, blessed day. This video is going to be slightly different from my other videos because with this video, I just want to address some important things and just speak my mind because I've done some further thinking, and for the past 2 months, I had this realization on different things, and more specifically this topic of old world research. So I just think I need to come and speak on this. I also need to do some clarification on some things that I've said in previous videos. With this video, I hope to shed some light on some problems within this community that I myself can no longer ignore. And so I'm promoting discussion with this video, and I'll love to hear what you guys think, what you guys agree with and what you disagree with. That's all part of the process, the way I see it. So I recommend and suggest that everyone, especially those who are looking and seeking for answers within this old world research, and those who are content creators themselves, to stick to the end of the video to hear me out and hear what I've got to say. And I'm not just saying that for the sake of it, it's because I think these are some important points that I'm bringing up. I must also say there is no shame in making mistakes, because only through mistakes we can grow and progress. So with that being said, thank you for listening to this long intro, and let's get on with this video. What you have to understand about the term Mudflood is that it is a very generic term. It is used to denote a lot of things, and this term is almost like a overbranching umbrella for sub theories as well, which I've also explored in some depth in my other videos. Some of these things include dust storm theory or volcanic eruptions, which leads the ashes to have this mud effect. Also, soil liquefaction. Therefore, that's why as of now, I think there's a problem with saying mud flood, because it's not necessarily a flood of mud. In some cases it may be, but in a lot of cases it's not. So I now think that this term mud flood is quite inaccurate in what we are actually looking at. Yes, the outcome and the effect of whatever happened is a mud. That's why it's called mud flood. But as for the cause, it is more complicated, in my opinion. So what do I think actually happened? I think that all these sub-theories about mudflood all have potential to have been causes for separate places. And I also think that they are related to each other, but indirectly as well, because they are not the same thing. They are related because I think that they are a cause of some kind of natural cycle, perhaps to do with sunspot activity or just magnetic excursions and magnetic pole shifts. So to clarify, I don't think it was a singular global event. In terms of the two mudflood videos that I produced and uploaded, I just need to do some clarification on them. So what I don't think many people realized and understood was that I made those two videos just to be a hypothesis slash theory based video and just simply just presenting a new idea. Because what my sole intent of those videos was to make the audience view history from an alternative point of view. Because throughout history, there has been things that are questionable, to say the least. So all I wanted to do was make the audience question what's happened in the past. It wasn't made to convince people that I was speaking in facts, right? It wasn't made to do that. I was just simply presenting something, and if it resonates with you, sure, go with it, and if it doesn't, then that's fine as well. Another thing that many people said was that I was mixing different concepts and ideas into the video. And the reason I did that was again trying to make people think from a different angle. It was simply an act to try to concise all the different subtopics and theories on this Mudflood slash reset theory into just a video that could be seen as an introductory to this research. Regarding with what I said in those Mudflood videos about what sparked my interest in looking into this theory was observing and questioning these what you would call semi-basements and buildings that have half windows and doors sticking out above what we call ground level. So I just want to touch on this and clarify on this as well. So even though this was the thing that made me question it, it is no by means me saying that all buildings that show this feature are because of what you call a quote unquote mud flood event. Now, I don't think that for 1 second that all of these buildings that have this feature are automatically because they are mud flooded. I don't think that, and I just need to make that clear. Through further thinking, I've come to acknowledge other factors that comes into why the architecture is like this, and these factors are such as economic factors and how builders in the past built their buildings in order to accommodate social classes. So, like maids, butlers, and servants used to live in these basements. Another reason why someone might want a basement is because of heating and furnace systems, which help ventilate the building. And that's with having a boiler underground. Another reason may be because, for space reasons, like a basement is convenient to put your belongings in and possessions. However, I still have some questions and queries on how they managed to do this in the past, like the practical implications of digging all these earth and rocks and mud out on both sides of the road just to get a building down the line that either doesn't get sufficient airflow, sunlight, and even in some cases to be just boarded up later on. Something to consider about if you're trying to figure out whether a building is quote unquote mud flooded or not is to look at the building's building material in the sense that, like in many houses in Europe, they have this feature that towards the basement and around that height on that building, they have a distinctive colour and building material variation compared to the upper floors. Now, if a house or building has this feature, that means that it's not mud flooded. That's just an example of an architect's intentions, right? Another thing to consider, and something I think that just disregards that specific building to be mud flooded, so to speak, right, is to look at its external window frame design, decoration, and style. If the upper floor ones have all the same styles, but the bottom floor at ground level or basement level window doesn't have the same style, design, decoration, then that building should be disregarded because it obviously was intentional to build a building like that. So I see these explanations to be correct for some of these buildings, but these explanations don't encompass for all of these buildings that we are talking and looking about, because these buildings have, in some cases, floors underground. And we know that they were not purposefully built like that because they have decorations, doors, and windows completely underground. And it's not until excavation on these sites occur that they find this. So, in a sense, it's been lost and forgotten about for however long. These buildings, I think, are the most revealing. Not necessarily in the way that they are revealing and telling us what exactly happened in the past, but in the sense that history isn't telling us the full story. Another thing that these buildings do is dismiss the idea of cultural layering or occupation debris, which is where cities and towns and just society doing its thing over time accumulates debris on the streets from just all the pollution and just everyone just doing what they're doing. And the reason these buildings are valuable to dismiss these is because these buildings have floors completely buried underground. Now, for that to happen, for cultural layering, that would happen over a very long, extensive time. And you will be assuming that people of the past were just lazy and didn't, just remove things outside their entrance door, for example. Another thing is that for cultural layering, yes, it does happen, but they build up in small amounts. As a result, I now don't think what many people claim to be a quote unquote mud flooded building just because they have this feature are because of a mud flood event. I think that many buildings have been falsely generalized to this. We must look into the context of the specific buildings we are looking at, such as its terrain, because I think the terrain speaks a lot. So its surrounding and where it is built. For example, if it's built on a slope, a hill, or a slant, then it's less likely to be a mud flooded building. Because even though it may show these features, and a lot of them do, they were simply built like that in order to have a solid, stable foundation. Another thing that you need to keep in mind if you subscribe to the soil liquefaction theory is that if you're going to call a building mud flooded, the building would be on a slant. It would not have a near perfect horizontal base. It will be shown tipping to one side or another. So I think that's important to factor in if you subscribe to the soil liquefaction / earthquake theory. To conclude this part, I just want to speak on some key points that if you were to take something away from this video, it would be this. In the past, there has been cataclysms that happened and occurred due to a cyclical nature that bring about a reset type of effect upon humanity. But calling them mud flood is quite inaccurate and inappropriate at what we are talking about because this term is generic and isn't specific enough. These events were happening worldwide, but when someone says mud flood, what we are dealing with is not a singular global event, but in fact multiple separate events that occurred. So I think that when someone says mud flood, I do not think that it is, for example, the great biblical flood. I think the great biblical flood is a much older and much bigger cataclysm that occurred a long time ago, much longer than what we are describing as mud flood. Most houses that have this semi-basement feature are not because of a mud flood. However, some may be, and for those cases, they need to be looked at in their specific contexts. For example, their topography. Try and find any construction photos. Where the real mystery lies are those buildings and just places that have completely buried underground things, such as like windows and doors and even arches some of the times buried under the street. Tartaria, Great Grand Tartary. This is another topic I feel like I need to touch on in this video to clear some misconceptions about this, as I see many people being misleaded within this community. First of all, let me just get this out of the way. Tartaria/Tartary was real. The problem I have with Tartaria, just like the Mudflood, is that I find too many people falsely generalizing and falsely attributing, in this case Tartaria, to something that isn't Tartary or has no evidence to show and prove that there is a connection to Tartaria or Tartary. In my video titles, I name them old world then something, as in a place, right? I don't use the word Tartaria then something. The reason I do that, and there's a reason, and a very important reason, is because the word Tartaria cannot be substituted for the words old world. And if you happen to do this, you are actually cementing a misleading view of alternative history. Because yes, Tartaria is part of the old world, but it is not exclusively the old world, if you get what I mean. This has led to this old world research community, or however you want to put it, to be easily discredited and looked down upon. Since I see so many people in the comments, after just showing a picture of the old world, they just put a one word of Tartaria and no explanation, just the word Tartaria. Like, how is this associated with this image that I'm presenting or someone else is presenting? How does this help in any shape or form? Now, let me dismiss the myths of Tartaria. The myths being that Tartaria was once a global, united, unified, virtuous civilization that was wiped just over 150 years ago, give or take. To show for the opposite of this, you just need to look at how big and tall they built their forts and castles. If this place of Grand Tartaria was this global virtuous civilization, why do they need to build all these defenses and fortifications around their cities? It just doesn't make any sense if you think like this. Perhaps, yes, they had trade and they communicated, but they built these fortification defenses to defend invading forces, which meant that they were not all civilized together in this one global, one world thing. This is such an ignorant view of history. It's as bad as those people who go on the internet and say all history is a lie. Obviously, all history is not a lie. Yes, there's been cover-ups and questionable events here and there, but to say all history is a lie is completely stupid. To carry on, many also like to entertain the idea that Tartaria is/was hidden history. And that is true to a certain extent, but I see that it's being blown out of proportion. What I mean by this is that I see many saying that there is an extreme assertive conspiracy to hide this from the history books. Yet, you are able to go on a search browser such as Google, search up images for Tartaria, and you will find many old world maps showing Tartaria. If it was a case that there is such an assertive force to hide this from all the history books, why can we just go on the internet and find it so easily? That just doesn't sit right with me. Many also like to point towards the declassified CIA documents pertaining to Tartaria and using this as evidence for such a conspiracy. The issue I have with this document is that Tartaria is not an anomaly in this case, in the sense that, to put it as plainly and simply as I can, that is what the Communist Party does and how they operate, even to this day, unfortunately. So using this as proof is not really a strong standing point, in my opinion, obviously. Furthermore, the idea that this Tartaria empire was a virtuous and all good civilization is dispelled by looking at old world maps, as I've previously stated, and is showing right now. The reason it dispels it is, as you can see, in each different maps throughout the times, its shape changes, which proves that there is some kind of political landscape occurring, and there may be external or internal conflict that has occurred in this place that we call Tartaria. Therefore, it dispels the idea of it being virtuous. There is also misconceptions about architecture with Tartaria. As many believe that Tartaria was this global civilization, they think that many of these fascinating architectures around the world are Tartarian, which is outlandishly wrong because in each of these buildings there are distinctive features that are not native to what we call Tartarians. Neoclassical is not Tartarian, Renaissance is not Tartarian, Greco-Roman is not Tartarian, Tudor is not Tartarian, Victorian is not Tartarian, Gothic is not Tartarian, Beaux-Arts is not Tartarian, Baroque is not Tartarian, Moorish is not Tartarian, Indian, Hindu, Islamic, Buddhist architecture is not Tartarian. I think you get the message I'm trying to say. It may be possible that in the past there was once a unified global civilization, but is that and was that Tartaria? The answer, I think, is no. As even with many of these architectural styles, people like to say is Tartarian, they are found in Western countries, usually Europe. And the problem with that is that Tartaria is found in Asia, and more so East Asia. So these styles cannot be Tartarian. You cannot equate an Indian temple to some Victorian architecture in England. This notion is reinforced by the idea that because many buildings, especially old world buildings across the realm, possess what we would call antiquitech, they all belong to this civilization of Tartaria. But in my opinion, I think these antiquitechs are a testament to the old world and how much more advanced the people of the past were. In other words, stop giving credit to these mysterious Tartarians over the people who actually built these. So I've spoken a great deal about what isn't Tartaria and tried to clear up some misconceptions about Tartaria. But what I want to do now is speak on what Tartaria probably was, because I don't fully agree with the mainstream account as well. So, according to Wikipedia, Tartary or Great Tartary was a historical region in Asia located between the Caspian Sea to Ural Mountains and the Pacific Ocean. Tartary was a blanket term used by Europeans for the areas of Central Asia, North Asia, and East Asia unknown to European geography. It encompassed the vast regions of the Pontic Caspian Steppe, the Volga, Urals, the Caucasus, Siberia, Inner Asia, Mongolia, and Manchuria. I believe the history of Tartaria isn't as simple as mainstream history puts it as. And this goes back to what I said about Tartarian being only a hidden history to a certain extent. Because I think Tartaria is more like forgotten history more than an assertive effort to hide it. The reason I think that Tartaria is more than what the mainstream account tells us is that obviously in many maps there shows kingdoms, and Tartaria even had flags and different ethnicity groups within Tartaria. So it is not necessarily a simple geographic area. At its greatest height, Tartaria probably was one of the most powerful empires on Earth, even possibly spreading across to North America. I say possibly because even though there are some maps that show that Tartaria did spread that far, we don't understand the political landscape of those times and who exactly made these old world maps showing Tartaria to be so big. So I'm just leaving that as a mystery. There even is a possibility that there was a Tartarian language or languages with multiple dialects, which I find very interesting. And Tartarians even had a culture. These images are from Nikolayan Witsen's book called North and East Tartary. All in all, there is definitely history to learn about Tartaria, and it's strange to see that it has been mostly excluded from history. In this video, I haven't included everything about Tartaria, as what I've spoken about is only touching the tip of the iceberg. Thanks for making it all the way to the end of the video. I know it was a long one, and at times it sounded like I was just ranting, so thanks for bearing with that. Like I said at the start of the video, what you agree with, make sure to comment down below. Let's start some discussion, right? And if you have additional information about what I've spoken today, please feel free to share it. Till next time, guys. Peace.